So now let's look at statement 16 of the first chapter of Gongchik. Statement 16. Statement 16 and 17 overall, these are two closely related statements. And this statement here, these two statements, the main point or topic there, or the main topic under consideration is this area of Buddhist studies, you can call it that, called valid knowledge. Valid knowledge. In Sanskrit is pramana. Pra is like a hyper. Mana is to to know. Pramana here has the connotation of valid knowing. What is a valid kind of knowing as opposed to an invalid kind of knowing? How do you know that you are knowing correctly? Yeah, and what constitutes knowing incorrectly? Yeah, so pramana. So literal translation is valid knowledge or valid knowing, and the opposite is invalid. Yeah. Then more generally, this is translated into English as logic. Logic, so the study of logic. And the study of logic. So a little bit of background before we actually look at statements 16 and 17. By the time of late Indian Buddhism, late Indian Buddhism means like from the height of Nalanda University. Yeah, so I would say 10th century, somewhere around there. Yeah, remember Buddha was born, 5th century BC. This is 10th century, so about 1500 years later. At the height of Nalanda, the Buddhist community, the Buddhist tradition has grown from being a small band of wandering ascetics following Buddha Shakyamuni, and as well as following teachers who were disciples of Buddha Shakyamuni. So this small band of and family of ascetics have grown by this point, 1500 years later, into a major religion in India, especially in northern India, northwestern India, and South India too, actually, by that point. I mean, we Buddhists, might think, oh, right from Buddha Shakyamuni's time, there were lots of followers. Of course, the texts usually tell it that way. But we know now, like from historical evidence and everything, that as impressive and clearly influential Buddha Shakyamuni was for those who met him and those who followed him, it didn't really become a mass movement, so to say, until centuries later. So by the time of 10th century, at the height of Nalanda Buddhist learning, one of the fields of learning, one of the areas of learning for anyone, who goes to Nalanda, and Nalanda is not the only institute of higher learning. There was also Vikramasila. There was also Somapuri. So there were several other centers of great learning. But Nalanda, of course, is the most famous. So in all these centers of learning, A field of learning known as pramana, or valid knowledge, or logic, has become an important subject as part of the curriculum. In part, why this study of logic or pramana became, you could say, you know, that the university decided to create a department for the study of pramana or valid knowledge, reasoning, in part because there was a very healthy and vibrant intellectual environment in India, whereby routinely people of different religions, spiritual traditions, and philosophies would debate each other. So that was part of the culture of India. Religious debates. Inter-religious debates and intra-religious debates, right? Inter between two religions, intra within different factions of the same religion. That developed a healthy, I would say a healthy intellectual environment. It's healthy because here certain rules have developed so that, for example, in these debates, it became accepted that you cannot debate someone from another religion by quoting your own scriptures and insisting that your scriptures that you believe in is correct. They say that you know, that is not debate. That is just trying to force your view on someone else, because that someone else don't accept in the first place, right? The validity, the authority of your set of scriptures. So over time, a set of rules became universally accepted among the intellectual class, the intellectual communities in India, no matter what spiritual tradition. Those who constitute Hindu, of which there are many types actually. You know, Hinduism is not one religion. Hinduism is just an umbrella term for religions of India that did not become independent traditions, such as Buddhism and Jainism. These are the two of the many, many spiritual traditions of India that became independent from the mainstream. Under the umbrella of the mainstream, which we just use the term Hinduism now, there are some people who believe in a God. And there are some who believe not in a God. They don't believe that there's God. But they are still a spiritual system. Some believe in a dualistic view, and they're proud of it. Of course, we Buddhists, we say dualism, but they believe in dualistic, and they give a good argument for why it's good to be dualistic. And then some Hindus are non-dual. So anyway, that's kind of footnote beside the point. So whether Hindu, whether Jain, whether Buddhist, eventually the intellectual community of India agreed that if we are going to debate, if we are going to meet each other and have these discussions about, you know, the big questions, we have to, of course, each of you will still be making your arguments based on, right, the particular view, the particular understanding that your tradition adheres to. Of course. But when we talk to each other, we have to agree on a set of rules. Okay? So instead of having my texts and my tradition be the agreed set of rules, logic, pramana, well, a particular kind of logic, in fact, because, Western traditions of logic, Indian traditions of logic, Chinese tradition of logic, can be different. Sometimes we think, logic is all the same. Not necessarily, I would say. Each kind of culture develops its own nuance of logic. Yeah. So anyway, in South Asia, in India, I say India, but really in ancient India, there's no separation into Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, or all of the South Asian continent. Yeah? In that environment, a particular agreement arose that when we meet and when we debate, the primary reference point will be this independent science, this independent standard, which they call pramana, valid knowledge. So the Buddhists, therefore, also had a department of valid knowledge where you can take classes in studying valid knowledge. So this is part of the background to the study of valid knowledge, or the study of logic, or the study of pramana in like Nalanda tradition. Then, of course, that tradition was brought to Tibet. Then the Tibetans studied that, mastered that, can be very detailed, very esoteric. In fact, the study of logic, in a way, in terms of like mastering it as a field of studies, is way harder than Madhyamaka. So logic is called, Logic. The study of logic is way harder than Madhyamaka. Madhyamaka is supposed to be the highest view, but the highest view is actually quite easy, when it comes to words. It's just no, 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 no. If you use no, enough times, it turns into Madhyamaka. I mean, joking, but the gist you understand, like, so Madhyamaka actually compared to logic, to pramana. Pramana, on the other hand, is very careful at defining everything. So you have to study all the categories. You have to study all the if this is true, then this cannot be true. And if this cannot be true, then it follows that this is also not true. So on and so forth. So later, even Madhyamaka also adopted this kind of reasoning, or used this kind of reasoning developed in the study of logic to further enhance and help the use of reasoning or logic in understanding the empty nature of reality. Now, one of the side results of this specialized field of studying pramana, studying logic, right, is that among some Buddhists, there were like a complete rejection of that. In fact, there were some, especially if you were not in India, if you were in Tibet, there was some feeling like, the study of logic, it was only because in India, Buddhists had to debate Hindus or Jains, that therefore Buddhists have to study logic. Other than that, no, we don't need to study logic. We don't need to focus on valid reasoning or valid knowledge. So there was a feeling like that. And that largely is in response to like a strong emphasis, that you have to know valid knowledge, you have to know pramana, you have to know logic before you can even understand anything. It's almost like, whenever you have such a strong position here, then you have a very strong shadow that follows it. So in fact, then these tend to be the quote unquote meditators, right? That says, this logic thing, first of all, it's not even necessary because there are no Hindus here to debate. So leave that alone. So there's that view. Then we might think, hey, wouldn't Jigten Sumgon agree with that? Right? You would say, based on what we have learned so far, it would seem Jigten Sumgon would agree with that. Yeah, this is, leave that alone. Yeah, this is useless. This valid knowledge business. There are no Hindus in Tibet, and there are no Hindus in Guatemala. Well, they are, in the sense of like, to debate. Today we don't debate anymore, so we don't debate anymore. We just yell at each other, So no need to study logic anymore, So it might lead us to think, that would be the way to go. But these two statements are very interesting because Kyoba Rinpoche is going to simultaneously emphasize that valid knowledge has an important role in a practitioner's life. However, he redefines to some extent the definition of valid knowledge. How does he redefine valid knowledge? I mean, he didn't make up a new definition. He takes it back, I feel. He takes it back to how the Buddha himself, the historical Buddha himself, I would say, would employ the use of valid knowledge, the use of reasoning as a good tool. So to me, 16 and 17 is a way of kind of balancing things out for either on the one hand, turning the field of valid knowledge into such a specialized and esoteric and hair-splitting field of study. And on the other hand, the extreme of saying, don't think about anything at all. Just meditate. Don't learn anything. Just meditate. Don't try to use reasoning. Just meditate. Just have faith. Because that we might think, just have devotion to the guru, just have devotion to the guru, and just meditate, because valid knowledge there's no use on the path. Jigten Sumgon will reject both these positions. Now, a side footnote for us, when we study these statements, of course, right now when we're studying these statements, we're going into quite a bit of detail. And in this case, I'm giving you background to appreciate the power of these statements, the impact of these statements in the original kind of audience that heard or saw these Vajra statements. So for example, these Vajra statements were probably circulated among Kagyu, not just Drigong. In the early period, there's not much separation yet into I'm Drigong, you are Karma, you are Talong, you are Drupa. So in the early Kagyu, so the people who like to meditate, these statements were circulating. But you can imagine how they will be surprised by what? He is defending pramana. He is defending the study of valid knowledge, the science of logic. Yeah. So people will kind of stop and say, wait, what do you mean? Then when you look at these two statements, you'll see that he's not advocating valid knowledge as a specialized department at the University of Higher Buddhist Learning. But he is emphasizing the importance and necessity of using reasoning where appropriate. And not only that, he in fact would raise it to the level of true valid knowledge. So now he's not talking about necessarily, right, the curriculum of valid knowledge as found in these institutes of higher learning, but he says the ultimate valid knowledge is actually Buddha's all-knowing wisdom mind. That's the ultimately valid way of knowing, right? Completely free from confusion. So now let's look at statements 16 and 17. But before we go there, actually, in case you have anything you need clarification based on me talking about the background, please, now is a good time.
Did this sort of emphasis change the way that the debate tradition is in the Kagyu versus like Gelupa?
Early Kagyu, there was not much focus on studying debate, and Gelupas did not exist yet.
Sure, but today, right, in monasteries, Dragong monks will debate.
No, I think standard logic stuff.
Oh, okay.
This Vajra statement, I don't think made any change. Yeah, what happened is that others, joined that kind of study, and because this redefining the terms and kind of reorientating things, right? It's almost felt like this is how you train your mind. Okay, go sit in that corner and do it. Leave us, the big boys, to continue to debate the way we should debate and conduct our department of logic, In a way, unfortunately. But, it is how it is.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the relationship between Pramana and Madhyamaka?
As I said, Madhyamaka is the study of the topic on emptiness. That's one major philosophical tradition in Indian Buddhism. The study of logic is in a way different. Well, it is different because, right? You cannot debate Madhyamaka with Hindus. Hindus do not accept emptiness. Yeah. So to study pramana is to acquire the tools of conducting debate. Now you can use those tools to start analyzing Madhyamaka as a topic. You can use those tools to analyze Chittamatra as a topic. You can use those tools to analyze Sautrantika, Vaibhashika. So these are all Buddhist philosophical traditions. Or you can even use pramana, and which was used to analyze Vedanta, Advaita, Sankhya. These are the Hindu systems. Yeah. So pramana is independent. You could almost say that it's a secular, because the understanding is we can all agree on logic. You can have your Allah, you can have your Krishna, I can have my Buddha. But you can, when we talk with each other, you cannot say, but Krishna says, I mean, you can say, Krishna says this world is round. Okay? And you try to convince those who say the world is flat. You can start your statement by saying, in our scriptures, Krishna said the world is round. Then maybe, the Buddhist and the Hindu says, no. In our scriptures, it says it's flat. So then the guy who says it's round now cannot say, but in my other scripture, it also says it's round. And then over here, it also says it's round. Then the Hindu and the Buddhist will say, I don't care. I don't accept your scripture. So that is when the Hindu who wants to defend and prove that his scripture is saying something that makes sense will say, now, okay, logically, the world is round because of ... Now you have to use logic. So that's when pramana comes in. Then the Buddhist can say, but if you say that, then it will lead to this or that, then how can it be round? So they can talk. They can debate, so to say. They can discuss. Yeah, so eventually Madhyamaka studies use a lot of the tools that are developed in the study of logic to advance sort of Madhyamaka reasoning. But they're two separate fields. So there are Hindu studies of pramana, Jain studies of pramana, Buddhist studies of pramana, but there's no Hindu studies of Madhyamaka or Jain studies of Madhyamaka, because that's a Buddhist topic,
Gracias.
So now 16, right? As I said, this is a comment, overall comment on statements 16 and 17. Now let's look at 16, what it says. It says valid knowledge. So valid knowledge is the gnosis. Gnosis is Sobish's choice for the word that we normally translate into wisdom or primordial wisdom. He uses this Greek word, gnosis. Yeah. Then knowledge is what we often translate as, or the original is jnana, whereas gnosis, the original is prajna, pragya and jnana. So valid knowledge is the pragya, the wisdom that is the jnana the knowledge of Buddhas. So in other words, he's saying, pramana, actually pramana is the wisdom that Buddhas achieve. As I said in my overall, at the conclusion, I said, Judaism will say this, that actually the real pramana, the real valid knowledge is the wisdom mind of Buddhists. And so this is said in response to what? There you have it on top. The prevailing view among some people, and I would say particularly probably among the people who like to meditate, which is people claim that valid knowledge is not a Buddha Dharma, since it is in common with the Veda of non-Buddhists. As in Veda, here Veda, simply means like the Hindu systems. That the Hindu systems also have this, so this is not, really a Buddha Dharma. This is just something that Buddhists, by circumstance, have to get involved in because they're surrounded by Hindus. With the implication that if you're no longer surrounded by Hindus, or Christians for that matter, and they're trying to debate you, then no need to study this. No need to spend time on this. So Jiten Simgun disagree. He says, actually, valid knowledge is the wisdom that is the knowledge of the Buddhas. So here, the commentary. Some hold the view that valid knowledge is an instance of dialectic conceptualization. So the general view, or some. So these are the anti-intellectual types. Yeah. And they'll say, oh, this is just dialectic, dialectic back and forth. Conceptualization. This is a confusion about the meaning and such literal clinging to the expression because it follows. So this expression, right, because it follows, is part of the vocabulary of pramana. And so the Madhyamaka people, especially the consequentialists, Prasangika, I know Tibet House, Mexico, and Guatemala, you are actually very educated, thanks to the efforts of emphasized by Andres. You're very educated in these topics. So in consequentialists, Prasangika, Madhyamaka, way of reasoning, this phrase is very common, because it follows. So as a consequence of. So that's why Prasangika, Madhyamaka in Tibet considered as the highest view, often considered as the highest view among all the views, among all the philosophical traditions. The Prasangika Madhyamaka are those who adhere to this principle of debate and reason using consequence, meaning you don't assert any positions yourself, but whenever somebody asserts that this prayer wheel is permanent, then you will start from that and you say, okay, if this prayer wheel was permanent, as you say, as you assert, then it follows then next step. And if that was the case, then it would follow that, so this is what you mean by consequentialist. So they reason, they debate using consequence As a consequence of you holding that position, therefore, you have no choice but to also hold this position. And as a consequence of holding this position, you will necessarily have to also admit to this position. And the goal there is to finally arrive at a completely absurd. So this is consequentialist in the sense of showing you the consequence of your assumptions. In a nutshell, this is the way consequentialists would conduct their reasoning. So, and how and where this came from? This actually came from the Pramana department. This expression, because it follows. So here Chodra says, those anti-intellectual types that says that this valid knowledge stuff is just conceptualization. And conceptualization is a bad word right here. It says this is a confusion about the meaning and also the literal clinging to because it follows. So here, Chodra is explaining that what the statement is saying is there is a more important use of these expressions because it follows, or the principle of because it follows. When applied in a way that only people in the Department of Logic can really talk about, then of course that is conceptualization, dialectic conceptualization. But the deeper validity of the statement, because it follows, that is completely how the wisdom mind of Buddhists would operate as well. So he says, and however, or therefore, valid knowledge actually means not deceiving and true meaning. And that is precisely the domain, the business of omniscience, which is a quality of the Buddha mind, omniscience, all-knowing. And so he quotes the Pramana Samuccaya, and this is actually the classic Buddhist text for studying pramana, for studying valid knowledge. He says, I bow down to the one who embodies valid knowledge, who wishes to achieve the benefit of beings, the teacher, the Sugata, and protector. So here he's using pramana texts to say, in fact, what are Buddhas? Buddhas are those who embody. They are the principle of valid knowledge, of not deceiving, not being deceived, of true meaning in human form, which is the Buddhas. Thus, it is certain that the one who embodies valid knowledge is precisely our teacher. Then another pramana text, Pramana Vinishchaya, says, since exact knowledge surely precedes the accomplishment of benefit and the abandonment of harm, I have composed this work for the sake of those who do not know that. And so another, very specialized textbook for the study of logic. So what Jiten Sumgön here is trying to do is to say, you should study these topics, but don't study it in such a academic way. Study it by understanding that this is to root out erroneous views within our own minds and hearts. Because true valid knowledge is none other than Buddha's wisdom mind. So here, since exact knowledge surely precedes the accomplishment of benefit and the abandonment of harm. Of course, people who follow Jigden, we love this, right? Accomplishment of benefit, abandonment of harm. Causes of happiness, causes of suffering. Adopt, causes of happiness, abandon, causes of harm. We like statements like this, and say, see, this is what it is all about. Other traditions are maybe more about, nature of mind, nature of reality, ultimate state, transcending everything, transcending right and left, up and down, right and wrong, beyond everything, cannot be conceptualized, but we like statements like this, since, to really know, right, what to abandon and what to adopt, you have to see clearly. So to the degree that this study of logic can help you see clearly, learn that. Because that is an instance of Buddha mind. Learn that. If you relate to these studies as simply a way to debate, then of course now your debate partners are already dead and gone. Who are you still debating? So I shared with you early on, His Holiness, our Holiness, when he was invited to give a talk and to attend the graduation ceremony of, all these in the Buddhist Institute in Ladakh. And they were doing debates and everything to demonstrate, and then at the end they got their degrees, the equivalent of like Geshe or Kempo, but in a non-sectarian way. His Holiness said, "You really want me to say something?" They're like, yes, oh Holiness, because he's an important figure in Ladakh, Then he said, okay. So he said, yeah, it's very good, you all can debate, Vaibhashikas, you all can debate, Swatrantika, and then, then he said, but today there are no Vaibhashikas walking around, There are no Swatrantikas walking around, There aren't even really Swatantrika Madhyamakans walking around, So it's wonderful that, you can debate so smoothly, so convincingly. But it's sort of like we would say, but these are now all straw men, So he said, you have to think about, what this is about, And he said, do you know what your Muslim neighbor believes down the road? He says, I think you have no idea. Do you know, what Christian missionaries believe, when they come to Ladakh to try to convert people? I think you have no idea, he says. So he says, even if you don't want to know about other people, and you just want to protect Buddhism, these days, just knowing how to debate Vaibhashika and Sautrantika and Advaita Hindu system, or Sankhya Hindu system, he said, it's not very useful, And he says, he says, yes, today there are people who are from the Sankhya system, like in Hindu, or the Vedanta system. But and then Holiness said, but just like us, their Vedanta and their, Sankhya did not freeze in time, They have also developed and changed. So your version of Sankhya, your version of Vedanta that you think Sankhya and Vedanta Hindus today believe, he said, I don't think so. He said, those people don't exist anymore, he says. Now, where I would add is to say, even if you want to study, like what Sankhya believed 1,000 years ago and have that debate go on in your head, what you can do there is to say, So you study the Sankhya, which is being debated by the Buddhists, and then you ask yourself, is there in my own way of looking at things any of these errors that the Buddhists found among the Sankhyas 1,000 years ago? Or even Madhyamaka people found these faults with the Vaibhashika, like the other Buddhist tradition. So even today, there are no more Vaibhashikas. So if you study this as if there are still Vaibhashikas, then it's useless, like His Holiness said. But if you study about the Vaibhashikas that existed 1,000 years ago, and they held this understanding, and this understanding, and through the critique or the debating of these three understandings, and if you look and you say, well, actually, on some days, just last Tuesday, I think that was how I reacted to a situation. So in that moment, I was behaving like a Vaibhashika. And then to be able to see, oh, that is why that understanding is actually wrong. Based on kind of Madhyamaka light being shined onto that situation, that is an error. There is an error in thinking. Then the study of pramana, of valid knowledge, is what the Buddha ultimately intended it to be. So another quote that Chodra gave. Anyway, through these quotations, it is established, 113. The reasoning, so of course, this is established for those who accept these texts, the authority of these texts. And of course, Chodra knows, for the entire intellectual types, they accept these three. So Chodra, so it's not that, whenever you debate, you cannot quote scriptures completely. It's just you have to take into consideration, are we in agreement that this sutra is authentic? Yes, we're in agreement. Okay, now let me show you where in the sutra, the view that I'm forwarding to you, that I'm presenting to you, is based on. So sutra or text as a source of valid knowledge is accepted. In fact, elsewhere, Jidin Sumgön will talk about the four valid sources of knowledge. And sutras is one of them. Your own reasoning is another one. So elsewhere, we will see this, the four sources. So here it says, the reasoning by such examples of an impossibility as the dog's head round stone and the rabbit's horn, and of the things to be evaluated for their supposed true existence, such as the pillar and the vase, and showing that for colors such as white and red, there is no black or red color in white color, and so on, may appear at times as the conceptual imputation because it follows. So he's saying, yes, so these are very common expressions used in debate, in pramana. So he says sometimes, these types of expressions might appear to be what pramana is all about, what this expression of because it follows is all about. However, ultimately, Y does not follow from X just because someone is seeing it that way, when in reality, Y does not exist in the fundamental nature of X. This is basically an earlier Vajra statement. And there it was in the context of, a guru who does not possess qualities. or does not yet possess qualities. No matter how much you impute those qualities on the guru, insofar as the guru, him or herself, liberated from samsara that way. So he's applying that statement in the context of this principle. So that means in saying it follows that, then there has to be a causal relationship between two. Because the guru has qualities, it follows then that the guru himself has what it takes to help the growth of those qualities in the student, because it follows. So continuing with the commentary, since valid knowledge is precisely showing just the way something is, according to the original state of the fundamental nature, this is the Shisam Babki Neluk, the first Vajra statement. This is related to that. So because when we talk about valid knowledge, really what are we talking about? We're talking about knowing the original state of the fundamental nature. The way it is and the way it plays out. So valid knowledge in the end is valid knowledge of the way things are in their essence level and the way they play out in their appearance level. Therefore, valid knowledge is none other than the gnosis of the Buddha's knowledge. Even though there are many quotations, for fear of making too many words, I will just leave it at that. Oh, that's a good way to end. That XY business, right? Page 114, those of you who have the physical book. If you don't have the physical book and you have the ebook, it's a little bit before the Vajra Statement 17. Above there, Sobish kind of unpacks that for us. So in the commentary, the statement is ultimately, Y does not follow from X just because someone is seeing it that way. So meaning, like, it breaks the rules of pramana by saying, there is a God. Why? Because I say so. So X does not follow from Y just because you want it to be. But I want there to be God. Well, yeah, fine. But still, God doesn't exist. Yeah? So this is sort of what it's saying. Yeah? It's like, I know you want God to exist. And I know when you think God exists, you will become a better person. Good. But the fact remains, there isn't a God. It's sort of what it's saying here. And you have to see that, So it says, ultimately, Y does not follow from X just because someone is seeing it that way. When in reality, Y does not exist in the nature of X. You get this statement? So then, maybe less about God, you can apply it in the karma, Ultimately, right? Happiness does not follow from killing. Just because someone is seeing it that way, when in reality, happiness does not exist in the nature of killing. No form of killing can give rise to happiness. And that is how you should use pramana. That is how you should use the tools provided to you by the study of logic, of good reasoning, in order for you to see this. And Sobish says, in other words, if the inferred truth did not accord with how it is by nature, so it is by inference, it follows that, right? It follows that. It's basically talking about inference, right? It's not your direct perception of it, it's by inference. Because there is smoke, what can we infer? Because we see smoke, we can infer that somewhere there is what?
Fire.
Fire, right? But because there is smoke, you cannot infer, right? Someone is starting a riot. You can infer that there is fire, but you cannot infer, right? Someone is starting a riot. It doesn't matter, if the last 3 times you saw smoke, in fact, there is a riot, right? That will be incorrect inference. Incorrect, it follows that. No, it does not follow that. Because there is smoke, therefore there must be a riot downtown. Maybe not. Maybe, it's a celebration. Lots of people, barbecuing. So, in other words, if the inferred truth did not accord with how it is by nature, it could not have been correctly inferred. Not that there is no correct inference. There is. But it has not been correctly inferred. And it is in this sense that correct inference is the gnosis, that is the knowledge of the Buddha. So inference is accepted as a valid source of knowledge. Scripture, sutras, scripture, valid source of knowledge. Inference, valid source of knowledge. So Sobish says, if I understand Choki Drakpa's argument correctly, he's saying that something is not so because of logic, but that something can be logically inferred because it is so. So in other words, the study of logic is not a study of truth itself, but nonetheless, the study of logic can lead us to a correct inference. And so here Sobish says, although Jigten Sumgön seems to defend valid cognition, this pramana, which is one of the basic tools of scholarship, the Drigungpas remain skeptical of philosophical views, chiefly because they see the holding of views as problematic, since this involves grasping. Yet, as we will see later, Jigten Sumgön is similarly aware of the dangers of grasping yogic experience. But that does not detain him from promoting yogic practice. Just as Jigten Sumgön might warn against the dangers of scholarship, philosophical views, collecting information, he does not dismiss the proper use, the proper role of studying, of acquiring knowledge. In any case, since the Drigungpas have never produced a scholar of the rank of the 7th or 8th Karmapa, the treatment of pramana is here confined to a few fundamental remarks. Yes, overall you can say Drigungpas, in the whole history of Drigung, never really produced, a very great scholar. Whereas in Kama Kagyu, which is a Kagyu tradition, their 7th Karmapa, 8th Karmapa, these were, brilliant intellectuals. even though they are also kagyupas. So among kagyupas, there are also differences in style. The most learned and developed, sophisticated intellectual ways are the karma kagyus. Then the energy of Drigongpas historically is spent meditating in caves. Comments, reflections?
Yeah, I was gonna say in statistics, this point about X and Y,
Mm-hmm.
like correlation is not causation.
Yes. Yeah, correlation is not causation. It's a comment, an expression. And so, yeah, Jigden Sungwan says, you don't confuse the two. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but also don't confuse, the bathwater as the baby.
And then this point about inference seems like it makes sense that if something is true, then it could be inferred. But the number of things that you can land on if you're inferring, that just seems like, it almost seems like a thought hazard to think, oh, I can infer.
It's a what?
Like a dangerous kind of belief.
Of what?
To think that I can infer things.
Well, there's also the danger of thinking you cannot infer things, right?
It just seems like incredibly difficult to me to actually infer to the right thing.
Well, therefore, there are four sources of valid knowledge that you work with, Yeah, you infer, then after the inference, for example, in those four, first you infer, oh, there's smoke. Probably there's fire. Is that fire a riot or a barbecue? Well, let's see. So then you have to refer to scripture, right? In this case, right, in this mundane case, scripture doesn't mean, look at the Buddha's teachings, right? It would be, let's look at, reports from the last few days, Then your inference may match the report closer, but no guarantee yet. But they are moving us. So then the final valid knowledge is said of the four is direct perception, direct unmistaken perception, because you could be directly perceiving and perceiving wrongly. There's also direct unmistaken perception, and there they say in these four sources only Buddhists have that.
So I guess the situation that I'm thinking of this in is thinking about how karmic seeds ripen. If I'm experiencing something unpleasant, I can infer that it has,
that you created a negative cause. Yes,
because of the scripture.
Yes,
but
and also because of your experience. No, that one, the general principles of karma is not scripture, it's inference from your experience. When you do something negative turns up.
But you can't, I mean, I can say for myself, I don't perceive that. Like I only believe that because.
So therefore you have to develop the power of inference.
Right.
Yeah. The inference is not like a given. There are wrong inference, there's right inference. And it's a spectrum. It's not, you're in room A or room B. Yeah. So from experience, when you steal, yes, there is the positive of you getting something, you know, but the happiness that you experience from stealing is not coming from the stealing, it's coming from some other cause, right? Because when you steal, right, you could succeed or you could fail. You succeed in stealing because there is actually some positive karma somewhere for you to experience having this new iPhone. But the act of stealing, right, depriving someone else of what belongs to them, that negative is also going to linger. Yeah. As you're enjoying your new iPhone, you're always like, ugh. Right? And you see someone walk near and you know you stole from, you know, someone who looks like that, immediately you are on guard, right? That's the negative that is coming from the stealing. But when you're using it, woohoo, so good. That is not the result of stealing. That is the result of some other positive karma ripening. So all that you can see from your experience and infer that. You want something more precise? Scripture. There may be something that the Buddha has pointed out even more precise. And this can be found especially in Vinaya texts.
Thank you.
Yeah. The problem is when we mix, you know, thinking stealing leads to happiness, because you're like, ooh, you know, this, wow, look at the photos, you know, takes much better photo than my, you know, SE, iPhone SE, my iPhone 4, you know, and therein is where we make the mistake. We think this happiness that I'm experiencing now is the ripening of the act of stealing. Y does not follow from X just because someone is seeing it that way, when in reality, Y does not exist in the nature of X. But because Y and X is occurring so closely, you know, then it becomes mistaken identity. That's why valid knowledge is important to develop. Yes, Antonio.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I was wondering, because logic, well, you can use it, for example, like even using logic to analyze logic. Mm-hmm. You can use logic to analyze something and see if it is incomplete, like the axioms. Mm-hmm. Like you see phenomena and you have axioms maybe, and then you see that if you need more axioms, or you can reduce axioms, so you can do things. And I guess that you can use that to classify teachings on like definitive, interpretable, like literal, etc. But that logic is like a tool, like that we could use. Like, is it the same tool like Buddha's use, or they have like a different, like superior logic?
It's superior logic when it leads to
yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So no, Buddhas are not hiding the superior tool and not giving it to you yet, and giving you the less superior one.
Okay.
It's your own maturity. It's the beauty of the way Jidin Sumgön presents the Buddha's teachings, you know, Gongchik. It says, it's not in the tools in the end.
Okay.
The power of the tools to transform us and bring us closer to the Buddha state is what makes that tool become more profound and more profound and more profound.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. 117, without going into, although, there's a lot, I think you'll need to read carefully over time, like the next 5-10 years, actually, all of this. Because there's so much to be derived, But 117 is emphasizing. If 116, right? It's more a general statement. 117 takes us closer to. So all this valid knowledge, all this valid reasoning, right? In a way, sort of following from what Antonio said. How do we know, that it is in fact valid? It is in fact, the right tools, used the right way. We know by the result of valid knowledge reveals true reality, which is none other than emptiness. When it reveals to us true nature of things, the end purpose of valid knowledge is that. In Chodra's commentary, he gives a lot of these categories used in the study of logic, the study of Madhyamaka. He uses all those. Because remember, he is writing this for a very educated audience who are trained in all these subjects. Yeah? Remember that part of what he's doing in this commentary is simultaneously to kind of impress upon, right, his own Drigong people, right, that we have something very precious, but that the standards of like establishing what is precious has slightly changed. Now scholarship is really important. So Chodra is demonstrating, even from the scholarship point of view, here it is. So Chodra takes that tone more. But Rinjangma and Dorshema has less of that kind of burden. Rinjangma and Dorshema. Rinjangma doesn't seem to even care about that. Dorshema does. Dorshema relative to Rinjangma. Of course, I've not read it beyond the sections of Dorshema and Rinjangma that Sobish provides. But also in talking to Khenchen Rinpoche, Dorshema has a lot more like quoting from sutras and tantras and treatises to kind of back up, the statements, which is a valid source of knowledge because those are scriptures that everyone who is reading that would accept. So Dorshema seemed to have been written with an awareness of the need to show where in the scriptures does it say this, where in the sutras, where in the tantras. Whereas Rinjangma was more, meditation wise, what is the experience of this statement? So Rinjangma and Dorshema, those are the style of their commentary. In Sobish's notes for statement 17, where it says here, Jigten Gun, however, says that the spiritual result of valid knowledge and of Madhyamika is the same, namely emptiness. Yeah? So, Adriana, yeah? Earlier you asked that question. So from this perspective, so I gave you the background, right? The background would say, oh, valid knowledge, pramana is just a tool, right? It's just a tool, tool to debate Hindus or tool to clear our mind. Here, Jigten Sumgun is going to say, actually, as far as the Buddha, insofar that the Buddha taught pramana, he didn't teach it for you guys to debate Hindus. He taught it for you to see the nature of the truth of things. So, yeah, the spiritual result of valid knowledge and of Madhyamaka is the same, namely emptiness. From his perspective of the single vehicle, pramana, yogacara, and Madhyamaka all have the same ultimate goal, emptiness. Now here, of the 7 states of mind, so this is more the study of logic. Of the 7 states of mind, only direct cognition and inference are valid knowledge. The first, direct cognition, refers to the cognition of the object of the senses. Here, it's a big topic. I don't want to go into it because we don't have time. But read that carefully, right? So direct cognition is not yet, it's not necessarily like, ooh, Buddha. Because ordinary beings, we also have direct cognition. When the eye sees an object of sight, that is direct cognition. But that direct cognition is not what we actually see. You know what I'm saying? In the first moment that the eye sees an object of sight, that moment is a moment of direct cognition. But in the second moment, an image turns up in our mind. And that image is flawed. It's filled with projections, layers of meaning, baggage. You choked on a chocolate, when you were 2. Until now, when you see a chocolate, you think it's dangerous. And so that's part of what direct cognition is about. Anyway, yeah. So here in the notes, Sobish gives us more. So if you want to know more, you can read that. 119. The bottom line is that when from the perspective of the single vehicle, valid knowledge, even though it may be only conventional, leads to the ultimate truth. Therefore, as it is stated in Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, relying on the conventional, one realizes the excellent meaning. Nagarjuna says that. In Bodhicaya Vatara Shantideva, who comes from Nagarjuna's kind of lineage, he says, the conventional can never touch the ultimate. There he's talking about something else. Sometimes people quote that so much, and they forget that that statement is made within the context of first Nagarjuna's statement, that by relying on the conventional, you can realize the ultimate excellent meaning. Because if that was not the case, then none of us will have any hope. Right? Because if we cannot realize the ultimate via the conventional, then there is no way out of samsara. You know what I'm saying? Because then by definition, we will never. But luckily, because we can realize the ultimate via conventional, therefore, the path is meaningful. Practice is meaningful. So in that sense, we're always working with the conventional. The same Sanskrit word, samvriti satya, can be translated into conventional and relative. And so it does carry two meanings, you know. I think when we say relative, there, it would be two sides of the same coin. Relative. When we say conventional, then we are translating samvriti as, samvriti also has a sense of concealing, hiding. So then conventional is something to be transcended. Relative is something to be realized. Conventional is something to be transcended. Do you know what I'm saying? Two senses of what, you know, samvriti satya. The two truths are paramartha satya, what we translate as ultimate or absolute truth. Samvriti satya, what we translate as sometimes relative, sometimes conventional. I think in English, it's good to be more precise. When we say conventional, then it's in the sense of what we see is not exactly what's going on, so we need to transcend what we are seeing and not be deceived by what we're seeing. So there's an aspect about samvriti that is kind of a lie. In that sense, is what Shantideva means. The conventional can never touch the ultimate. But the samvriti is relative, is what Nagarjuna, how Nagarjuna is using samvriti, as in you have to rely on the relative to realize the ultimate. So here with Sobish, you know, he's not using it so strictly, conventional and relative. If I were to modify his statement at the end, I would say, relying on the relative, you realize the excellent meaning. Then if I was translating Shantideva's quote, the samvriti cannot touch, cannot reach the paramartha, there I would say the conventional cannot reach. This is a translation issue, a choice of words issue, but it does illuminate the two senses of samvriti, of relative truth, of conventional truth. (16 and 17), yeah. So then next time, maybe, you know, 18 is somewhat related to 16 and 17. It's sort of like as a consequence, you know, of that. Here, Jigdan Simgon in 18 is basically saying, you know, especially that's now in the context of like debating others, you know, debating non-Buddhists and all of that. So the need to refute, using debate and logic to refute, to show the error of the non-Buddhist systems, right? So it says, people claim that refutation of the various tenets is necessary vis-a-vis because of the situation of Indian Buddhists. So then Jainism will say, actually, no. Whether Hindus exist or not, whether Christians exist or not, as long as you are still holding tenets, then you still have a problem of stubbornly clinging to views. So it says, all upholders of tenets are own tradition holders. As long as you hold a tenet, then you are partial. So this should apply even to Gongchik, He will be very sad if we turn Gongchik into a tenet system. Don't hold so tightly. That's how you turn it into a tenet system. Don't hold so tightly. Clearly, we need to understand. But don't hold so tightly. Oh, this is how we Drigongpas think. This is how. Okay, good. Comments, questions? Closing discussion?
I found the example of the fire, the smoke, very useful and clear. I guess if you infer incorrectly that the presence of smoke is a riot, as the wrong example, the incorrect example, and let's say somebody takes action on that incorrect
Yes.
and sends a news reporter to the site and something else happens.
Or these days, send the police.
Yes.
And quite literally, where a lot of, terrible things happen.
Yes.
Send the police, thinking that the police is going to fix.
Yes, and they're going to...
And they go shoot people at some party,
Exactly. But let's say that the person, going back to the karma thing, the person who inferred incorrectly that the presence of smoke is it infers that there is a riot. If somebody else, if this reality is further solidified by other causes and consequences, person will never be able to.
Oh, yes.
This is incorrect, but
exactly.
He will receive the effect of the karma, but it will be something that he or she will never understand.
Yeah, that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah. So
that's why
logic can be...
Negative karma can be so sticky.
Yeah.
So Jigten in the Gongchik, in many ways, you will see. Like the three poisons, attachment, aversion, and ignorance. He will say that of these three, they all need to be purified. But of these three, he says, ignorance is the most dangerous. Superficially, it often looks like attachment or aversion is more dangerous. Because why? Because you can see the cost of attachment and aversion more immediately, more quickly.
Yeah.
But the way ignorance works by definition is you don't even know what you don't know. And once that is kicked into action, it undermines everything without you even noticing.
Yeah.
So in the context of like discussions about vows, we'll see this point being brought out very clearly. Yeah. Our superficial relating to vows, right, is to say, a vow if you cannot keep it, right? You often hear that, you know. No, don't make a promise if you cannot keep it, right? You know what Jiten Sumgan says? Precisely because you cannot keep it, you have to take the vow. Like, what? Yeah. Why? Not so that, you know, you can go break the vows, but the purpose of the ceremony of taking a vow is to serve as a conscience check. Yes, you're going to continue to kill. I know that. But better you take the vow that you are not going to kill. So each time, you know, you kill, each time you steal, you know, you have the power of the ritual going, oi. You know, that's negative. So if you don't take the vows, right, basically you're saying, you know, ignorance is fine. Lying is worse, right? Because that's the logic of like, don't make a promise if you cannot keep it, as in, lying is bad. Jiten Sumgun says, yeah. So lying is out of attachment. But Jiten Sumgun says, you know, between out of attachment and out of ignorance, the consequences of out of ignorance is far reaching. Now, there's, of course, the level of conventional relative reality. So from that, you know, it's not good to say, okay, you know, I don't think I can keep the vows of monks and nuns, but I'm going to take them and wear those robes and walk around and still do all the things that, you know, I'm not supposed to do. Of course, don't do that. But mentally, if you are ready and brave enough, you can say, I will mentally take the vows of monks and nuns, even if I'm not living as one, so that it will keep pointing out to me. There is some non-virtue going on here. There's some non-virtue going on there. Like the example I like to use, you know, one of the minor vows of monks and nuns is your sitting cloth that you sit on, which is an object that is permissible in a monk's personal belongings. A monastic's personal belongings, if you follow the Vinaya very closely, it's a limited number of things, under 10. The classic list is 8. So this sitting cloth, right? It says that if the width, size of the sitting cloth is beyond 4 fingers from your body, that's an infringement of your vow. So then you think, well, I'm not a monk. I never took that vow. Yeah. So there's no fault. If I have a, you know, carpet the size of, you know, 5 people as my own sitting cloth, you think, is there non-virtue or not? Of course there's non-virtue. Because your greed mind, you don't even think. Right? You don't even recognize that it's your greed mind, your mind of greed, that is unchecked. But if you mentally took those vows, you know, this is my interpretation, then at least, you know, every time you sit on this big fancy thing, you go, you know, here's my, on the one hand, my greed working. Yeah. On the other hand, this is a finite. Yeah? This is from more like modern things that we know. This is a finite universe. When I disproportionately consume the resources of this world, it's at the expense of someone else. And so we should recognize that. I'm not saying that, you should guilt yourself everywhere you go. That would be an unskillful use of the vows. But nonetheless, those vows, they are given universally. So don't think. Later when we look at the chapter on Vinaya, we'll see. Sovish coins an expression, which is Vinaya for all, is Kyoba Rinpoche's view. Monk or not monk, none or not none, Vinaya is for all. Okay. Chanchu Semchu Rinpoche Ma Kye Ba Nam Kye Gyurche Kye Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Ya Wone Gong Du Be War Shu. Okay, next time we meet is on Wednesday. I am going to give us our old login and ID and password, which is the Guru Puja and Gongchik study. So the Sakadawa that we've been using now, it's over this year. Yesterday was the last day, but I forgot to send you a reminder of the old login information. But now I'm going to share on WhatsApp. So you need to look at your WhatsApp, okay, for that old information, which I'm going to send. So, okay.
Thank you.
Gracias.